All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are at our final panel. Please take a seat, come back from the coffee break. We are ready to go with the final panel. We at the World Manufacturing Forum, we discuss sustainability, we discuss talent and skill gap, technology, geopolitics, but what's the bottom line when it comes to business model, organization, operational model, and how to innovate facing all the changes we discussed since yesterday. That's the topic of our final panel, Innovate or Else, Economic Tipping Points for Manufacturing Business and Operating Models. Let's welcome the panelists, starting with Cynthia Hutchinson. Cynthia is CEO of the U.S. Center of Advanced Manufacturing. Welcome, Cynthia Hutchinson. Jeff Winter, Smart Manufacturing Advisor at Chesme, and a very well-known online, because on LinkedIn, his content on Industry 4.0 has been seen, I think, 6 million views. 60. Oh, wow, 60. Okay, great. And Vinesh Maharaji, who is Associate Director at PwC Smart Manufacturing in South Africa. All right, let's have an applause for our speakers to start with some energy. Thanks, everyone. As we mentioned, Africa at the end of the last panel, let me start with Vinesh Maharaj to understand your point of view on all the changes we were discussing. What are your experience in South Africa and how you see the perspective of the evolution of business model, organizational models today?
Yeah, so what we're seeing here is it's a very developed world perception of what's going on. And, Africa is not as advanced as what is happening in the rest of the world. And we're seeing that this may not really apply as it is in Africa. So if you look at how far away we are from the rest of the world, but now we have the critical minerals that everybody needs for the energy transition, the models will have to change to creating more partnerships with Africa. It has to be a less extractive relationship where we have business partnerships with foreign countries creating manufacturing capabilities in Africa and beneficiating the minerals instead of just extracting raw minerals, exporting it, the typical pit-to-port scenario, and beneficiating it elsewhere. And that'll create shared prosperity.
How would you see the main sectors inside manufacturing? For example, automotive. We discussed a lot for the European experience, the Chinese one. How about your reality today?
So automotive is one of the most advanced environments in South Africa, and because we're connected with the global supply chain. So for your information, 2/3 of the vehicles manufactured from all 7 major OEMs are exported to Europe from South Africa. About 95% of BMWs and Mercedes-Benz out of South Africa are exported to Europe. And that's why that becomes a challenge because of things like CBAM, where we know now with the carbon border adjustment mechanism, it's going to be challenging for us with our very dirty coal-fired grid to avoid the CBAM certificates that come into effect in 2026.
Yeah, sustainability is one of the main challenges for manufacturing in South Africa, in my understanding. How are companies adapting or reacting?
It's reacting because it's a matter of survival. In South Africa, our economy, we've heard fact, India 7%, South Africa is 0.1 to 0.3% for a variety of reasons. And it's off a large base compared to other African countries which have like 6 or 5%. But so we have the conundrum where you need to survive for today, but then how do you take a long-term view to be competitive in the future? And so we're seeing that companies that are headquartered in Europe have to comply with CSRD, so they're pushing that back down. If you look at net zero commitments as well, that's also being pushed down from a global level because of commitments of various companies, and most companies will be part of the Scope 3 emissions requirements, so we all have to comply, but at increased costs. So how do you recover this cost if you're a single-digit margin company?
Now, Cynthia Hutchinson, and it comes back to sustainability, to new business model, also circular business model. What do you see as emerging trends in this with what kind of impact on the manufacturing sector?
In the manufacturing sector, what we've seen on the early stages of circularity, and circularity is still pretty early, I think, for most of us, we're seeing energy reuse. We're beginning to see a lot more in the IT sector reuse. But the things that we know best, if you're American, we know a lot of the resale methods that actually the apparel manufacturing accounts for arguably somewhere between 25 and 40% of our waste. When you look at that, some of that resale manufacturing is valuable not simply because it's reselling, but because it's tracking. So it's using traceability skills and to take traceability back to the source of the product. So you can track something all the way through from its first to its second to its third and fourth use. And that's becoming a model that other businesses can use to create profitability. There needs to be profitability. You know, we talk about sustainability for the greater good, and I like to think of it as the greater good, but the reality is for companies who have margins, and you know, I live in the US where we've got quarterly reporting, things need to be reported on a regular basis, and they need to make sure that a path to profitability exists. Sometimes the technology it takes to get us there has a blip of about 2 years before it can reveal the profitability. So in those first couple of years, you have to be storytelling until you get to profitability. But the industry that has started to show true profitability first has been apparel, followed quickly by IT, and we're using some of those raw materials we need.
Absolutely. And before going on with discussing a new business model, how would you state the state of manufacturing currently? How does manufacturing feel, at least in the US?
Well, 5 years ago, I couldn't have said sustainability in the US. It was not of interest. It's been fascinating to me working globally because I'm affiliated in some ways with the World Economic Forum. When I'm in a World Economic Forum meeting, I've actually been in a meeting where apparently I was with all Europeans. And the conversation was wrapped around batteries and recycling, and of course, it was auto batteries. And the conversation was very matter of fact. Everybody would take the battery back to where they bought it, and they'll turn it in before they replace it with a new one. And I'm listening to this conversation. After a while, I thought, I have to say something. I have to say something because this is a very European concept. In America, people don't walk their plastic bottles to the curb. We just, unfortunately, I do. Not everybody does. So the fact that you would buy a car with a battery and then have to drive 3 states away to return it to the appropriate source, it's insurmountable. So I asked the question, so what is the incentive being offered to facilitate that? And everybody stopped and stared at me like, why is there an incentive? It's the right thing to do. So I think we need to recognize the difference between America and other countries is we need a lot of growth, we need a lot of emotional growth, and basically consumer behavior changes before we even get parallel with the EU.
Actually, it's the same kind of question that also European customers are asking, talking about the transition to electrification of vehicles and so on. So, Jeff Winter, let me go back to technology and data, because manufacturing today is all about data. And what's the potential to unlock new business model that comes from data, and how are companies profiting from it or still lagging in profiting from it?
So great question. So consider this. According to IoT Analytics, as of September, so last month, we are surrounded by 18.8 billion connected IoT devices. And that doesn't even include laptops and cell phones. And it's these devices that are creating an unprecedented revolution in data generation. Consider this on top of that. According to Statista, we're staring at a mind-boggling 147 zettabytes worth of data that we're anticipated to generate this year alone. That's 147 trillion gigabytes. Consider it this way. That's 29,500 times the amount of data as we generated in 2003. That's a huge amount of data. And you might be wondering, yeah, but who's creating and who is consuming all that data? It's not retail. It's not healthcare. It's not finance. It's manufacturing. According to McKinsey Global Institute, manufacturing consumes nearly double the amount of data as the next highest industry. Yet here's where the problem comes in. We're not using that data. We're not tapping into it. According to Splunk, 55% of enterprise data is dark data, which means it's a mystery, unknown, unused by anyone in the company. That's kind of like going to explore an ocean and having absolutely no idea how deep it is. So what can companies do about this? What can manufacturers do about this? First, you need to change your mindset to be data-driven. Not just data-driven, but you need to be moving away from reactive thinking to proactive thinking. We're great at capturing and using all this data when something goes wrong. We're not good at using it to predict future outcomes. We're starting with predictive maintenance, but you need to be thinking about predictive operations. That includes predictive production, predictive quality, predictive safety, and predictive maintenance. The second I would say is democratize your data. Make it visible and usable by everyone in the company. Because right now, all that data is locked in silos. According to PTC, 34% of companies reported data generated in their department was widely accessible on enterprise systems. And that's the best stat. It's going to get worse from there. 16% from data from other departments, 9% of data from products in the field or customers, and 8% of data from suppliers. That's terrible. Imagine if that were 100%. And the last thing I would say is be creative. Don't just think of using data for improving operational efficiency. Use it to drive new business models. Most manufacturers are able to create new streams of revenue just by analyzing how their products are used or maintained in the field. They take that data, they turn it into insights, and then offer it back to customers, either as a competitive advantage or they charge a premium for it. So there's a lot of ways you can take advantage of the data.
Absolutely. Cynthia, we've been discussing also here about the trend of servitization. There's another trend, product as a service, and it's all connected with reducing waste and since the design of the product on. What's happening in the US?
I'll get to products as a service. I want to, when you talk about data being reused and actually sold back to people, one of my favorite ways that data has been sold back to me, and by the way, I purchase this on a regular basis, and it's not the raw data that's sold back, but the use of data. Delta Airlines, like many airlines, started, they built a great app a few years ago. I'm reasonably sure they did not build the app to generate extra revenue. They built the app to have convenience so people would fly more on their But what happens is it used to be, if you go back 10, 15 years, you bought an airline ticket, you had your boarding pass, you gave it in, and you waited wherever you waited, and you got on the plane, and you sat in that seat. Now, you're sitting at the gate, and you're sitting at the lounge, and you get a notice that the uptick for a first-class flight is only $75, and you go, you know what, I'm going to do that. So there's a resale. So Delta Airlines has made a large sum of money off of having you get updated information once you're in the airport that they've been collecting from us all along. They know what seat you're in, they know how much you pay, they know how often you fly, and they know where you are in the airport. So they just uptick you. So those kinds of things often are unintentional consequences and delightful outcomes of something like that.
Vignesh, this is a global opportunity or challenge. How are African companies, South African companies looking at that?
Yeah, so product as a service is obviously a much more environmentally friendly way of dealing with the transition. The question is, how do you actually monetize it successfully, right? Because we, in manufacturers, we just make more and more widgets, so we make margin on every widget. So how do you augment the product to come up with services that then can become a subscription service for you to then realize revenue instead of producing more? So like in South Africa, we've got large number of mines, so we have people who sell water as a service. They pump water to the mines, they take care of the pump, they get paid on how many cubic meters of water they provide. Same with cooling air, etc. So instead of selling them the pump once off or the fan once off, you now provide the product as a service and you maintain it and take away that headache of the manufacturer or the miner. It's not on their balance sheet, it makes financial sense, and they don't need to have the operational expertise to maintain and manage that piece of equipment. So it's only upside for the actual operator. So that's a bit of outsourcing by providing product as a service. So we're seeing a lot of that innovation happening. And if you look at the technology with VR, AR, etc., you can provide remote services. So there's a very innovative company in the eastern part of South Africa who makes assembly lines for the automotive. They commission their lines remotely. They can provide remote support, providing a full virtual reality training of the lines. So we have pockets of excellence of this kind of technology in South Africa, but it's not pervasive because you need large budgets. Now, if you look at R&D spend, when the company we visited yesterday, a simple coffee company, I won't say simple, but they spend 4% of their revenue on R&D. If you look at the stats for R&D across Africa, South Africa spends less than 0.1% of GDP. The per capita is less than $250 versus Europe, which is $2,500. So without R&D, you're never going to get ahead of the curve.
Jeff Winter, yesterday and today it emerged that many companies, well, all the companies, they invest in digital and they invest a lot also in Gen AI because it's, the world of the day. But just a few companies are digital. So being digital is difficult. You mentioned dark data, you mentioned the ocean and the deep of the ocean where they're going basically blind because it's difficult to adopt, technologies and tools that force your company to reshape and to reorganize, to change the way it used to work. What's your experience in this? What can facilitate the transition concretely today?
So I would say there's 4 major challenges as to why this occurs. There's cultural resistance, organizational complexity, technological readiness, and workforce readiness. And if we look at cultural resistance, I took a poll of all 8 billion people in the world and found out that no one likes change. No one. Especially when they're told to change by other people. And in fact, if you look at ProSci, the company, the change management company that certifies people, they did a study this year and found out that companies with good change management in place are 7 times more likely to succeed than companies that don't have change management in place. 7 times more likely to succeed. And it really comes down to having formal change management in the company and being transparent about what you're changing and get the people involved. So that's the cultural readiness. Organizational complexity is more unique to manufacturing than other industries. If you look at just, let's say, healthcare, almost all hospitals have a similar workflow to them. They're doing the same procedures generally everywhere. Banks are run the same at each of their facilities that they have at each of their locations. But manufacturing facilities, you don't find any 2 that are alike anywhere in the world, even within the same company, let alone the individual production lines or the machines are very different. So you have to navigate this organizational complexity, which also slows things down. The third is around technological readiness. Every company has an IT department, and they need to modernize their IT stack. Manufacturers have an OT, operational technology, where you're dealing with the machines and the equipment. Those 2 are very different, and you need to not only modernize both, but also integrate both at the same time in order to be effective. That needs to be a core part of transformation initiatives. And last is the workforce readiness. So this is arguably the biggest challenge and hurdle to come over. In fact, according to Rockwell Automation's State of Manufacturing report this year, for 2 years in a row, they said that skill gap was the largest reason that they were behind in competitive advantage, that any company reported behind in competitive advantages because of a skill gap. And also, according to LNS research, in 2019, our workforce is not coming back. In the United States, in 2019, the average tenure of a manufacturing employee was 20 years. In 2023, 3 years. The average time spent in a position in 2019 was 7 years. In 2023, it's 9 months. That's crazy. That means if you've been in your job since the beginning of this panel, you're doing awesome. So we need to focus on skilling and taking advantage, reskilling and skilling our employees and focusing on them as the part of your digital transformation. Because for digital transformation, people are the focus, technology is the tool, and more value is the outcome.
Cynthia Hutchinson, jump into these points. Cynthia, what's your take on these points?
So one of the things I think we need innovation. We talk about innovation in a product all the time. We do need to innovate our products. And I think in Africa, one of the benefits you have is a lack of legacy equipment. The U.S. is burdened, as is Europe, with a lot of legacy equipment that become those anchors that are, tying you to the bottom of the ocean and don't even connect to anything. We don't know what they're connecting to. But the part we rarely talk about innovating that I think needs the most innovation is a true innovation of how we train people. Training taking the in-person class and making an online class is not an innovation. It's just a different delivery system. There's an entirely different way to look at what do you receive on the floor? What does your workday look like? How can we intersperse your workday with paid breaks that are actually your upskilling and get you to the next level and document that and also document the results? I know we're doing a project in AI where we're going to be doing, and it's upsetting the AI world. My PhD friends in AI, I apologize ahead of time, I have pushed the PhDs to focus, instead of getting more and more PhDs in AI in any country, that we start to look at getting a fundamental knowledge of what AI is and what it means to you on the work floor. Because when you talk about culture, when we talk to people about AI, the very first thing the vast majority of people think is replaces my job, makes me worthless. Getting them on board early on to say, actually, because you are a foreman on the factory floor, you have an opportunity to show us a metric, and we're going to teach you how to dive into that data that's been sitting there dead, dive in the data we're already collecting, capture the right things, turn it into a document, turn it into a process that enables us to increase productivity. The higher profits enable you to have more job security. Like, that's the circle we need to do. That's the circularity I really like, because I think it's got potential.
Yeah, yesterday we heard from Vanessa Wainwright about the manufacturing skill passport, the idea
Yes.
of mobility, of education. What's the situation in the US, where I think that every state has kind of different rules, isn't it?
Well, among the situations, one is I'm going to be talking to Vanessa. That was Vanessa. Loved that conversation. But the other thing is, in the U.S., and I know that people around the world know us, but when I did a fellowship with the World Economic Forum, it was just post-COVID, and many people said, well, you're lucky. You live in the U.S. where there's one set of rules, okay? There's not one set of rules in the U.S. at all. We have 50 states and 75 rules, but the same is true when you look at education. So what I've had, particularly automotive companies, they come to me and say, it took me almost 2 years to know that I built a new plant. It's going to have 6,000 employees. In order to run 6,000 employees and have a strong workforce and open the doors, I had to know what I was going to get. Where are my employees coming from? Who's a 4-year college? Where's the 2-year college? Where's the training schools? Where's the academy? Where are all the different forms that you feed into to run a manufacturing facility? It took that company, which is a well-known global top 100 company, 2 years to get those answers from one state. Then the woman telling me about it literally sighed, and she looked at me and said, and now I have to do it in another state. And I thought, oh my God, like, what a horrible mess we've created. So I said, don't do it in another state. Give me the template. Don't tell me the state, nothing on a letter. Give me the template you got after 2 years from a state with everybody's permission. We now have that template. We now know what an automotive company needs. We've gone to 5 states to bring together, before I heard the word passport, I may call it a passport, I got to get permission, to bring together a unified, we're calling it cross-state certification for EV and battery. So you can start to build, but the U.S. has to start to build some consensus across states where we can compete on a variety of other incentives and infrastructure. Don't compete on how you upskill your workforce.
Vinesh, how are South African companies, responding to the channel of education, of skills, and also the introduction of AI in the process?
So it's quite challenging in that we have a very disparate education system in South Africa. So you've got a very thin piece of the population that's well educated, but education doesn't mean you've got skills, because you need experience plus education to give you skills. So we unfortunately have a very poor maths and science skills, so STEM is becoming important. It's not being prioritized because of certain political agendas. So we need to address that quite urgently, because that'll continue with the high levels of unemployment in South Africa. You may know it's 33% officially. It's technically 42% of unemployment if you count the people who have stopped looking for work. So it's a very scary situation. That's where your social instability could come from. So what manufacturers are doing in South Africa is we need to access global skills as well. So our visa regime has just been revised last 2 weeks ago with the new government, which is now liberalizing how foreign workers can participate in the South African economy, which will then drive GDP growth. But there are programs where it's continuous upskilling, reskilling of workers, so that we can get away from this notion of technology will steal my job. So we've done research in South Africa where we've spoken to companies adopting 4IR about 2 years ago. We do this every 2 years. And they said that if they are allowed to adopt 4IR, there'll be 30% more jobs. And it's like the US case where the lights out factories have more people employed than when the factory had people in them because of all the data analytics. But in order to do that, you need a STEM educated person so we can do all the analysis because it's now moving towards data analytics and becoming a data scientist. So yeah, so it is complex, it's diversity, as I said, pockets of excellence, but unfortunately the large majority are unemployable.
Yeah, is manufacturing attracting for youngs in South Africa?
No, that's where we all, I think, I'm glad to hear it's a global challenge. We need to make manufacturing sexy again, right? So I fell into manufacturing because it was the first job when I qualified at our university. I studied electronic engineering, ended up at a sugar mill doing automation and control. But we need to change the perception of manufacturing. It's perceived to be a dirty industry. People don't want to go there. They want nice office jobs working with computers. We need to show how we've transformed manufacturing to adopt the latest technologies and make it attractive to the youth because there's lots of misperceptions. So we need much more positive, I would say, indoctrination of people about the benefits of manufacturing and the importance of it.
To make it sexy, and I repeat myself, manufacturing has to communicate differently. And Jeff Winters, you're kind of a LinkedIn star. I don't know if you're also on TikTok or not, not yet. But if you want to speak, to generation from Alpha on, you probably have to. But having said that, it takes a cultural shift also internally of the companies. But it's good to talk in forums like this, and then everyone goes back home, goes back to its corporation or companies, and then practicing this is really difficult. Do you have any suggestion, practical suggestion, how to approach or speed up the cultural shift that is needed to go in this direction?
So one of the things you have to consider is the speed at which innovation is changing in the industry right now. And some of you may be familiar with the technology adoption curve that's famously attributed to Everett Rogers. And if you're not, it's a sociological model that describes the adoptance or the acceptance of new innovative technologies in defined adopter groups, and it takes on a normal distribution shape. Very few innovators. There's actually evidence to suggest, written in a journal article, that shows that this is seeing a positive skew, shifting more people into the innovator category. And if you think about this, the role of the Chief Innovation Officer, or CINO, is one that didn't even exist 20 years ago. And yet, according to Forbes, 30% of Fortune 500 companies have one in place. And if you were to go to LinkedIn today and look it up, there are roughly 18,000 chief innovation officers in the world right now with that exact title. I did this last year. That's 3,000 more than last year. And if you were just to type the word innovation, there's over 280,000 people right now with innovation in their title, which is 20,000 more than last year. So companies not only need to innovate more, but faster than they ever have before. If you look at Industry 3.0, the motto for Industry 3.0 was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That worked when people were focusing on efficiency and stability. But in Industry 4.0, we're focusing on agility and innovation. And that motto doesn't work anymore. Things are changing too fast that now failure to react quickly can be catastrophic for companies. Look at ChatGPT, came out November 30th in 2022. How many companies had to completely rechange their entire business strategy as a result of one product being introduced? Think about that. And now, stuff is coming out even faster. So I almost like the motto now, if it ain't broke, digitize it anyways. Because that's more appropriate in the way that you should be thinking right now. We need to really be allowing for space for experimentation for our employees. That is a big mindset and cultural shift. Google famously has their 20% rule, which allow their employees 20% of time to invest in innovative ideas and experimentation on stuff that's not directly related to their job. Imagine if you unleash that to your workforces and what people can come up with. Everyone can be innovative. And just because it's not new to the world, which would be an invention, it can still be innovative, either to your industry to your company, to your department, or even just to you. And don't dismiss that just because it's innovative to you doesn't mean you shouldn't explore it. The next thing you need to do, like I mentioned earlier, is democratize your data, but you also need to train your people on how to take advantage of that data. Not just the executives, but the frontline workers. You need to teach them how to take advantage of this data to make better decisions and to experiment with that data and make decisions based off of it. And the last thing you need to do is you need to change how you reward your people. Once again, if you reward them on stability and efficiency, innovation is not going to be top of mind. If you reward them on innovative idea submissions, that will completely change the way that your culture of your company works.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, Cynthia, they say if you want to run fast, you run on your own. But if you want to go far, you have to run together. And, you know, manufacturing companies are not an island. And it takes public and private stakeholders to work together with policies, investment, partnership, collaboration. What do you think can be the best model to strengthen and speed up innovation and the best relations that manufacturing can try to establish with other stakeholders today?
I think public-private partnerships are exquisitely designed, if they're well run, to make that happen. Because the reality is, in any nation, you know, we're looking across the globe here, in any nation, the funding mechanism to encourage companies, particularly companies that aren't really large, to actually invest in innovation is very challenging. So those innovations require some financial support, but there can be things as creative as government offering a stipend, government offering part of the award, government being part of the challenge. But I think the important thing is that there are multiple paths to innovation. One of them is inside a company. That is the hardest one to execute. Very large companies have a hard time executing. They build a sandbox. They do a variety of things to try to get people to innovate. They have competitions. The chief innovation officer sits in and weighs in on those. They talk about giving bonuses. But often the true innovation, when you're inside a company, it's a lot harder to see it totally differently. The way you get an entirely new innovation is often an entirely new company in a different industry. We just did an innovation summit that brought in 3 industries together, and I know I had people anxious when they heard about the verticals that we were going to run, because we did mobility, textiles, and construction. And within an hour, one of the panels said, "Wait a second, hey, we're in construction. Who's here from mobility? Automotive's already solved this. Can you help us solve this problem?" Mm-hmm. And that kind of energy, it comes from outside a company, outside an industry, and often needs some government support to keep it sustained financially.
That's a terrific example of cross-industry support to move towards innovation. And also in your country, how are companies moving towards a more collaborative operating model or business model?
Yeah, I like that cooperation that came up from the report, so competition. So what we're seeing is, for innovation to succeed, you have to have the right culture. And the culture should be fail. Fail fast, fail forward. And a great example of that is what we saw at the beginning of this conference, right? With SpaceX returning the rocket back to the launch pad. And I was watching it on the plane in here, and what the person commenting when he took off said, "I don't expect this thing to actually work. I expect it to crash or land in the sea." But when it returned, everybody was surprised, but the person said, Elon Musk is on record saying, "I don't care if it crashes. I'm collecting enough data to learn what went wrong so that we can get it right the next time." So you need to have leadership who are brave enough to enable their people to take chances, to fail, and then you're going to get innovation at much higher rates. So in South Africa, we are seeing, because of the intersection of the various challenges we have, which is low GDP growth, a skill set that's not ideal for the future of manufacturing. We've got all this global challenges of being put upon us. As a developing nation, we must comply with CBAM, with the dirty thing. So and all that cost associated with that. How do we solve these simultaneous equations to still be competitive in the market? And I'm glad to tell you that we do this, because we'll be releasing our PwC manufacturing report next week. And manufacturers have increased their revenues in South Africa. Food and bev has been one of the largest performers. Profits have plummeted, but that's because they have now 146% down, but because they are reinvesting to try and survive all of these competing needs. And what I feel is important is if we talk about a just transition, right? There's a just energy transition, there's a just industrialization challenge. We need to have the developed countries investing in Africa and South Africa to help us green our grids. We can't have the countries, and you've heard this before, but I'm going to reiterate it because it's such an important point, is that the climate crisis we're having was created by the developed countries' majority. We look at carbon indices and carbon intensity, but the Earth doesn't care about how much of carbon equal CO2 equivalent tons you create per capita or per whatever. It's about actual tons generated. The people generating those large amounts of tons of carbon, the 40 billion I heard yesterday, should be taking more responsibility, not looking at an index that says South Africa is the most carbon-intensive country in the G20 because our economy is mainly primary orientated. Obviously, we'll be more carbon-intensive versus somebody like the UK, which is tertiary financial services orientated. So we need to have investment to help us transition to level the playing field. Why must we pay additional taxes to access the European market because of CBAM when we didn't create the problem?
Yeah, CBAM, it's also in Europe and in Italy, there's a huge discussion on how the mechanism, the carbon border adjustment mechanism has been set up, and industry are asking to correct or modify many aspects. It's interesting to understand an African point of view in terms of how Europe is approaching this and the impact on manufacturing. But Jeff, again, he was mentioning cultural shift, he was mentioning way of innovate. They say tradition is innovation that succeeded and many innovation fails. And he just said, fail fast and fail forward. It takes courage. It takes to be bold to do that. Those companies in the manufacturing space have that kind of approach today?
Not as many as I would like, but I would say in addition to that, it takes formalization, which is the biggest recommendation I need, is you need to formalize innovation in your company. There needs to be someone in charge. Depending on the size of the company, it may be a dedicated role or a team, but someone needs to be in charge of the innovation process. Because it's not one person that innovates, it's the whole company that innovates. You need someone to set up a system to allow all these ideas that are created by all the employees to percolate up so that you can decide which ones to act on. Some of them are very simple, very cost effective, others may be a big deal. But if you don't have that in place, no one will ever innovate. It gets back to that mindset. If you're treating it in the Industry 3.0 mindset, you're not rewarding innovation, which means you won't even have an innovative culture. And as part of formalizing innovation, you do need to train your employees on what innovation is. Just like you said, most people think of innovation as product innovation. Dublin has their 10 types of innovation model that just shows product innovation is one of 10. And if you don't even know what the other 9 are, chances are you're not even thinking about ways to innovate in your company.
That's very interesting, Cynthia, because he's talking about formalization, standardization, and Italy, the country I know best, is a country with SMEs, and they're very proud of their ability to be different. Everyone different from the others, tailor-made products for the market, differentiation based on their original way to do things. Is that a way you can innovate, or is that a problem that, it's an obstacle on this road to innovation?
It can be an obstacle. It can also be a bonus for small companies because some small and mid-sized companies are more willing to roll the dice. An earlier panel, somebody talked about middle management. We're here talking to the senior management. We're talking about factory workers, and that middle management's in between. And I fear that the innovation gets stuck there, that in the boardroom there's conversation about we're going to innovate on the factory floor. They hear they're going to innovate, and this middle manager is stuck with the role of the risk because the culture has to permeate every layer so that middle manager doesn't feel a potential negative reaction for the fail. Like the fail fast you talk about, fail fast is great if you're failing or if your CEO says you can fail, but if you're in the middle manager and you're allowing people who work for you to try to innovate and they fail, how exposed are you and where's the culture? That's where you need the formality. You talked about the structure. So you have a structure that enables everybody to feel safe in that. And I think that regardless of the size of the company or where your geography is, that security of being able to innovate without a punitive recompense would be helpful for people.
All right, and the final round based on a question from the room here. And the question is, we often talk about transition, but the pace of change is increasing so much that we'll actually be in a constant state of change. How can business models adapt to this scenario? Vinesh.
Yeah. Well, there's a common saying that only change is constant, right? And it's just becoming, the pace of change is now becoming so fast. You need to be agile. And it all comes on back to what we discussed now, culture. If your leadership does not create that enabling environment for you to continuously innovate, then you will never keep pace with change. The idea is you disrupt yourself before somebody else disrupts you. That's the only way you can survive. It's adapt or die.
Jeff Winter?
I'm going to support that. You need to be agile, and you need to be agile in all different aspects of the company, organizationally, technologically, all the aspects. Look at, once again, ChatGPT as an example. I know one manufacturer had 40,000 employees. At the date ChatGPT got announced, they had their proof of concept within 30 days and their full production rollout within 1 year. That isn't because of the technology, that's because their organization was able to recognize it, experiment with it, and roll it out because they had all that in place already. So they're ready for the next ChatGPT. And I know most companies don't even know what to do with ChatGPT yet, and now it's been out for over 2 years. So you need to be agile and you need to build that into your company, technologically and organizationally.
Cynthia.
And unfortunately, we're just going to agree here, but I think it's similar that digitization is essential because digitization is the enabler. You can't do things quickly without digitization. So once you have the digitization in place, and then you allow, and you really have to work. Culture requires so much more work than people think. That cultural piece is not a given. You can digitize faster than you can change a culture. But if you have the participation of people as you go, whatever the level is, if they're participating in the digitization decision making, they become more adept to it and more acclimated, more willing to push it out. But I think that if you have digitization and culture, those things can reiterate, and it's just a nonstop iteration. It's like iterative design at this point. We're iterating our own companies daily.
Non-stop innovation. Get ready for that. Thanks again, Cynthia Hutchinson, Jeff Winter, Vinesh Maharaj. Thanks for joining the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, let's talk progress by innovation, climate change action, and the role of sustainability supply chain. And we are really glad to have a keynote address from Ana Palanicio da Souza, Chief Digital Transformation and Artificial Intelligence at UNIDO. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure and an honor. UNIDO and the WMF have been partners for many interactions for many years. It's my first time here, but I feel at home. And it's a pleasure for me to address such a distinguished audience. During conversations, one question that I got a lot was, but I didn't know you existed. What do you actually do? So let's solve this problem for once and for all, and I'm going to do a quick presentation on UNIDO, but it will be very quick. Thank you. A little bit about UNIDO. We are part of the UN system. We are one of the specialized agencies of the United Nations, which means we are part of the family, but we are an independent organization. We have our own budget, we have our own member states, we have our own governance. And we've been a specialized agency since 1985. We started as a part of DESA, the Department of Economic Affairs of UNIDO. So our Director General is Mr. Gerd Miller since 2021, and we have 172 member states. And we have a mandate, because everybody in UNIDO needs to have a special job. Our mandate is Inclusive and Sustainable Industrial Development, ISID. And our activities our biggest activities is technical cooperation, but we also do action-oriented research and policy advisory. From these interventions that we do in the field informs our research. So most of our research is very practical, is action-oriented, and in many cases tested in the field, meaning we can come with the solutions, not just the theory. We are very active in normative activities and standards. We have very strong partnership with ISO, and we're also very active in the sustainability standards. And last but not least, and that's what I'm here for, partnerships for knowledge and technology transfer. Oh, sorry, I went too fast. So we are not one of the biggest organizations, so we don't carry the same brand equity as UNDP or UNICEF or even UNESCO, but we cover the world. We are everywhere. We have liaison offices in Brussels, Geneva, New York. We have a very extensive field network that is 48 physical offices, but we cover 158 countries, most of them in developing countries. And of course, the investment and technology promotion offices that we call ITPO in 10 locations, of which I would like to highlight ITPO Rome, that is here with me today. And what are our priorities? We have 3 jobs, very simple. Ending hunger, very easy. Sustainable supply chains, clean energy and climate action. And from these 3 priorities, we have the cross-cutting themes: technology and knowledge transfer, circular economy, investment promotion, training and skills, and last but not least, digitalization, which is the theme of my office. So, but why we talk about inclusive and sustainable industrial development? I'm going to start with inclusive, which means that industrial development, it's basically the take of industrial development on the UN principle of leave no one behind. So industrial development must include all countries, all people, all sectors, and everybody should benefit from industrial development. And I bring somebody much smarter than me, so those are not my words. This is from the Industrial Development Report of UNIDO, and I'm just going to read the last sentence. Developing countries should not be tricked into thinking that they can skip the industrialization phase. Factories have made the modern world and will continue to reshape it. And our work is primarily the beneficiaries are primarily the countries of the global south. And that's a very important point that we want to make. It's industrialization, everybody can profit from industrialization, no matter where you are. And why sustainable? And that's very simple. And this is, I'm going to give you a lot of homework today, because I know that WMF already gave you a report to read. I'm going to triple the homework today, but this one is easy. Industrial development must decouple the prosperity generated from industrial activities from excessive natural resource and negative environmental impacts. Why? I'll bring you the pie. A lot of people talk about flying, a lot of people talking about air conditioning, a lot of people talk about cars, but when you really look at the share of greenhouse gas emissions, unfortunately, we are #1 with 29%. And of course, electricity also pays, there is a big correlation with electricity as well because of scope 2. So if we want to go to net zero, we all have a lot of work to do. So this is not an academic report. This is actually from Bill Gates' How to Avoid a Climate Disaster book. But if you don't feel like reading, you can also watch the Netflix special. The pie is also there. He really refers to it as the pie. So not everything is homework here. It can be fun. So, and let's talk about, we talked a lot about, we didn't use that term, we talked a lot about tipping points in those 2 days. UNIDO, we like to talk about megatrends, meaning they've been going on for decades. They are reshaping the world. Everybody needs to be aware of that and learn how to adapt to them. Indeed, there were several inflection points in recent times. So the term tipping point is very correct. But the megatrends are the energy transition, because it affects manufacturing and it affects the way that we are consuming. And it's one of the areas where we reached a positive tipping point with the growth of renewables. And of course, the advent of green hydrogen, an area that we are very, 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 very strong. The fourth industrial revolution, that's my bread and butter, but it's also as we talked a lot about in smart manufacturing, Industry 4.0, and the megatrend is the fourth industrial revolution. We talked about the global rebalancing, nearshoring, offshoring, reconfiguration of supply chains, friendshoring. So this is also a mega trend. So it didn't start yesterday, but it's still shaping and will continue to shape for many years to come. And of course, demographic transitions. Certain countries, their population is aging, which from the productive sector standpoint, it means that they will leave the workforce, and at the same time, they will become consumers of very specific industries like assisted healthcare, and which will also be a booming industry in countries that are aging. And of course, the population is the younger population, the population who's coming that will enter the workforce, are in other regions like Africa, the Arab states, and South Asia. So this all matters. So here's some homework for you. If you want to learn more about the global perspective of industrial development, the Industrial Development Report 2024 of UNIDO. So what is the potential of AI for industry and manufacturing? Let's talk about the technology tipping point that everybody's talking about, which is the rise of AI and artificial intelligence. Because, of course, it's used to streamline operation, enhance efficiency, and to give insights that can give new revenue streams and increase revenue and create decent jobs. But what are the challenges? I think there is a lot of SMEs in Italy, so I think everybody will. The challenges of SMEs are harder in the developing countries, but I think they're the same everywhere. Difficult access to finance, limited knowledge and implementation capacity, lack of standardization, lack of collaboration. And in the context of developing country, we also talk about bare-bone basics, lack of electricity and lack of internet connectivity. We still have 800 million people disconnected. And in some cases, they don't have access to stable electricity. So more homework, and that's our policy brief on the AI divide and how to bridge it. And if I can use one picture to exemplify the country AI divide, that would be it, because we did this drawing based on that correlates the income of a country, the wealth of a country, and their capacity to adopt and implement and profit from AI. And those are perfectly concentric circles. So the richer the country, the more capabilities they have to leverage AI for development. Meaning, if left unattended, the digital divide and the AI divide will increase, which is something that we are very active stopping. So key message, AI is a catalyst for technology advancement in manufacturing. The current distribution of AI has a stark disparity, and if left without action, will get worse. Developing countries must prioritize and pursue robust AI ecosystems, skills development, and international collaboration. And of course, UNIDO wants to play a central role in those efforts. So we talked a little bit about Industry 5.0. And so I want to reinforce that point by advocating a people-centric approach to digital transformation, where innovation and advanced technologies serve human welfare and environmental sustainability, and not the other way around. AI serves humanity. Humanity doesn't serve AI, and we need to ensure that that's the case. So we work a lot with women, youth, and vulnerable groups. And of course, we don't talk only about manufacturing. When we talk about industry, we're talking about the entire productive sector, digital trade and agribusiness, and so on and so forth. The smart manufacturing we are very strong, but this is not the only theme where we work. So we want to do the bridge, help developing countries bridge the digital divide, overcome challenges, and reap the benefits of digital transformation through our activities. And of course, just a sample of what we do, we have our convening platforms. I think that the most important one for this context is the Global Alliance on AI for Industry and Manufacturing, and we welcome everybody to join. It's an open and inclusive platform, and we bring partners from all the sectors: private sector, academia, civil society, and government and intergovernmental. We also work at the national strategy and sectoral and national strategies and roadmaps. We have a lot of work in value chain, digital transformation, and technology upgrades. We do all our research is open access. We also work at meso level with the ecosystem, innovation ecosystems, AI ecosystems, technology hubs. We also work in smart, sustainable cities, a lot of capacity building and skills development because it was stressed a lot. And last but not least, an area where Italy is very strong, trademarks and branding and design. We work a lot with Italy, especially in the area of design, and intellectual property. If you want to know more, I hope I still have 1 minute to leave this open. The first QR code is a growing catalog of our solutions. It's a part of our websites, of the work that we do. The Knowledge Hub is where is our repositories of all our open access research. And don't worry, we don't have anything that is not open access. And last but not least, if you would be interested in joining the Global Alliance on Artificial Intelligence and Industry Manufacturing, I want you to consider to join AIM Global. So thank you very much.
Thanks again, Maria Paula Niscio da Souza. Thanks to UNIDO that has been supporting the World Manufacturing Forum also in the past. Thanks. And, you know, she touched many of the tipping points we discussed yesterday and today. To me, it was a great addition. Just before leaving the floor for the closing remarks, I would like just to thank the World Manufacturing Forum Foundation for having me, you all for the attention and also the participation. Many, many questions. I'm sorry I couldn't pass through all the questions to the speakers. We at Class NBC, we cover manufacturing and innovation and technology day in, day out. So let's see you, if you will, on Class NBC and Milano Finanza. Thanks again, and I leave the floor to Professor Marco Taisch and Diego Andres and David Romero. Microphone, please.
Okay. So we are back, and I'm very happy to see a lot of people still here. And why don't you join me in the middle? This is not. Otherwise, I feel shy to be alone. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. This is not the closing session, because in the afternoon we have the event organized by the young manufacturing leaders, and which is everybody's invited to attend. But we want to make a point on the day. So there are a few slides. Shall I? Maybe let me go here. Yes, exactly. So a few numbers that we wanna share with you. We have had like 470 unique participants yesterday afternoon and this morning, and 27 speakers from many different countries from all over the world. We had the West, the East, the North, and the South with us, and we are very happy that whenever we have invited a speaker, they always say yes, and in a very short time, and that means that the event is getting momentum, the event is getting recognized at the global level. And you see here then also a split of the participants, where they are coming from. I'm happy that almost 50% is coming from industry, and that's very important, because the target of the World Manufacturing Forum is the companies in the industry. We are here to support industry. We're here to support the future of manufacturing, and the future of manufacturing is therefore done by industry. Innovation, as we listened this morning, is very important. It's fundamental. That's why there are the academia, the RTOs working together. But that's it's very important that industries are here and are attending the event. We got the report, and David with the editorial team was responsible for that. The report, you can download it from Last year, we had more than 10,000 downloads of our report all over the world. The target for this year, of course, is higher. And I think that there is a lot of content inside. Let me invite you again to have a look at it, to read it, and share with it. If you want to be, the WMF is an open platform. Everybody, it's an informal community, right? So if you want to feel, or if you think to be an ambassador of the World Manufacturing Forum, you are kindly invited to do it. And we are here for everybody. And we are here for the future. We are here, we listened this morning, we listened yesterday, what are the challenges, and everybody should contribute to solve this and address these challenges, and the report is one of the way to do it. Yeah, that's when we get to the community, let's leave it to
the thank yous. So here, like a special thanks to the sponsors. So UniCredit, the Mix, EIT Manufacturing, the Masters, and Oracle. And our technical sponsor, the MTDG, Confindustria Lombardia, Manufacturing Indaba, Intelligent Manufacturing, and Class CNBC. And thanks also for the company which allowed the industrial visit. I heard like very good things about that from yesterday morning. So Pirelli, Cimbri Group, and ST Microelectronics. And then a special personal thank to really all of you. Has been really an event which was really truly global, and I think it was some sort of reassuring that we are all in the different country, different region, living the same challenges, and so we're all united into that. I heard a lot about resilience, which is of course is fundamental for our company, but I think we need to be very careful while we're building this resilience, and not to build up too much in isolation, because isolation it's a risky war. So I think we need to really compensate, find the right equilibrium between resilience and open collaboration. So we really thank all of you for joining us today. And as Marco said, it's not finished. We have the third part of our forum, which is very, very important about the YML. And I also we heard it from China, we heard it from United States, we heard it from Europe, we heard it from South Africa just now about the importance of making the industry and manufacturing an attractive place to be for our young generation. And for WIM, we also heard from Christina how really relevant, what the company that adopts such diversity really make the difference. And so I think that really those two very important things. So this is a global challenge. So we need, of course, to do better in our companies. We understood and we heard a lot about this sustainability demand, which is very, very strong. But we also need to be better in the way we communicate. And we rely a lot, for example, on the young generation and the YML to be ambassadors and really tell the different message of the industry, because that's super important to us. So again, thank you very much. And again, it's not finished. We're going to be again together this afternoon. And now, David. Thank you.
Well, you can make the honors of clicking and announcing our topic theme for next year, key enabling technologies for the future of manufacturing, roadmaps and platforms. As this year we look into the future and we put some milestones, so when we need to make things happen, to be ready when the tipping point is reached, and as Marco was saying, be on the positive side of the tipping point. Once we have reached that momentum, we need to do it together, so that's platforms, and then we need to have a path, a journey towards being ready when the tipping point reaches us, so that's the idea of the roadmap. So next year, we look forward to having you here again at the World Manufacturing Forum 2025, Key Enabling Technologies for the Future of Manufacturing, and the future, we build it together. Thank you very much for joining us this year.
We're back at 2:30.
Well, 2:30, we're back with the young manufacturing leaders, and for now, it's lunchtime. Bon appetit.